Okay, I see people are coming in from the waiting room. So, hello, everybody. So great to have a real good turnout here and online as well. So, I'm happy to introduce four staff persons representing the something called the Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technologies in Taipei, which is a government-funded think tank under the National Science and Technology Council. So they're studying Taiwan's resilience, and resilience is a key topic um, for deterring the outbreak of a war or a quarantine or a blockade in the Taiwan Strait. If Taiwan faces some vulnerabilities in terms of resilience, and they'll talk about those: energy supply and subsea cables and political resilience and so on. And I have the impression, although I don't know for sure, that the serious study of these vulnerabilities is a relatively new thing in Taiwan. And although you guys work for the DPP administration, it's not limited to the DPP. I've met some KMT-oriented people who are also very concerned about it. And I think if Taiwan can establish its solve the various vulnerabilities that your research identifies and find ways to demonstrate that it's resilient, this will have a tremendous impact both on American policy and on Beijing's policy. So it's a very, very important subject. So these young people, if I may so say, smart young people, are sort of cutting edge people on doing the research on these issues, identifying the precise weak points, developing policy recommendations, and they have a website with a lot of good information. So it's great that we have an opportunity to hear directly from them about their research. And instead of me introducing each of you, perhaps one by one, that you save time, introduce yourself as you make your presentation. So we'll have four presentations, and then I hope we'll have time for Q&A. We are recording. Folks in the room and online should know that. So we'll put the talk onto our YouTube channel. And for people online, you are welcome to put questions and comments into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so I think we'll start with Tsai-Ying, right? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. This is really truly an honor for us and for Andrew for so kindly to host this and have this event here at Columbia University. We have already heard a lot of good things about Andrew, and also we admire his works and also your program. So yeah, this is truly an honor. And DSET, as Andrew just mentioned, we just established in 2023 under National Science and Technology Council. And originally this organization, actually, they focus more on R&Ds in emerging technologies and all these very basic scientific research. But recently, they just found they were being forced to facing all these kind of questions, right, in the media. So all these questions shooting to Taiwan about how Taiwan can sustain itself against any kind of interruptions in terms of the imported fuels, how Taiwan can survive under quarantine, its energy system, and also about how do we defend ourselves against PRC regarding its weapon supplies and its inventories, so our drones and our satellites, our communication resilience issues, and also very importantly, how do we defend ourselves against all these kind of PRC campaigns in terms of disinformation and the recent AI computing models and everything? And finally, most of things maybe almost others be more familiar with is Taiwan's TSMC and also these semiconductor issues, right? So Taiwan's TSMC, and it's very promising that how they can be still sustaining this position and face all these supply chain risks also imposed by China in recent days. So DSET is aiming to answer all these kind of questions. So we focus on geopolitics of emerging technologies, and our missions are two-phase. One is for public facing. So we did a lot of public conferences and also events, and that, I mean, you are all very welcome to Taipei and to also to attend one of our open events for sure. And also we have a very close relationship with our governments. For each of our programs, we actually collaborate really closely to different sectors and also agencies. So we have 4 research programs to cover all these very difficult issues and complicated ones. One is economic security. We have research. Also, we have our deputy director Ming Yanzhang here. He's open to any questions that you have regarding any kind of things about semiconductors. Okay, and then so they did the supply chain analysis in terms of for example, the recent capacity about not just the advanced chip, but about the legacy chips production and the capacity that China is increasingly dominating the supply chain, and how we are analyzing it, and that probably can overtake Taiwan in within 2 years if we do nothing. This is one of the recent report results from their report. Our second team, the democratic governance, we also have our director, Kai-sen Huang here. He will also sharing with you his recent report and results regarding Chinese AI model and what's the characteristic of that and what we should be aware of. And then our national security team, we also have our deputy security director Hong Lun-Zhang here. He is an expert in terms of the drone supply chain. So how Taiwan can build its own direct supply chain, all MIT, not using Chinese-made components. And you guys know how expensive and how challenging that could be, right? So they just recently published a report on Taiwan and U.S. collaboration in terms of drone supply chain cooperation, and that's already resonated a lot recently. I mean, I think yesterday we have a CNES event. You can also Google it. A CNES event talking about these issues as well, and communication resilience is also one of it. And finally, my team. I'm the team lead of Energy Security and Climate Resilience Program. And I'm Tai Lu, by the way. And so my team focused on 3 things. One is we did simulation models in terms of how Taiwan can survive itself against quarantine or something. And also we study how do we direct the supply chain of clean tech. So especially solar panels and batteries for sure. And finally, we also analyze how China is developing its climate diplomacy, and under these climate collaboration, how China is actually increasing its investments in critical mineral mining in Southeast Asia. And that is also a very specific topic, also harder debate due to the recent weaponizing critical minerals issues, right? Okay, so that will turn to my presentation. I will try to keep it short because we have all our 3 other, my colleagues are also very excellent. They will also share with you their recent result. But I mean, I try to use this title to frame all our recent works in my programs, because I think, as Andrew said, how Taiwan can enhance its energy resilience is not just about the wartime days, right? It's also about the peaceful times. How can Taiwan can support enough electricity to its semiconductor industry and also AI infrastructure in the future? That's key. So my team, this is a report that we done. And I apologize, this is in Mandarin because this is a hot debate in Taiwan, and so mostly we publish things in English, but this one is a very exclusive example that we talk about how Taiwan's recent expansion of advanced chip production in specific regions, in the science parks in different regions of Taiwan, and how that actually puts some pressure to Taiwan's power system. So this report will analyze how the recent, you can see the trend, how they are consuming the electricity and the increased amount of that. And just to give you a number, Taiwan's current energy or electricity consumption, over 50% were consumed by industrial sector, and semiconductor industry is the highest one. So like 80% of that was consumed by all these fabs. So you can see how that could still increasing in the future, because we still wanted to remain our advanced chip being produced in Taiwan. So how do we face that? One of the things we we found based on our simulation model is that, in terms of the total amount, we did a simulation for the next 10 years, how the Taiwan's energy demand and supply will look like in the next 10 years. And you can see that in terms of the total amount, there's no such a thing as power shortage in the future. So there will be enough power and electricity supply to support our semiconductor industry and both of our air industry as well, because we already calculated the increasing demand from those two sectors in the next 10 years. But what is the current challenge for Taiwan's electricity power system is? This is also true for all these data centers that we're going to be built in Taiwan, is that we already see a transmission bottleneck that happened in our northern region, which means we have very limited, because Taiwan's power grid is a centralized one, and we have very limited substations to transmit all these electricity from different regions from different power systems in different regions of Taiwan. So there's a transmission bottleneck from the south to Taipei, the demand center, and there's also, you can see the utilization rate of all these substations are already over like 50%, which is pretty high, if you can say, from technical perspective. So this is the major challenge, I would say, for Taiwan's power system to actually supply enough, not enough electricity, but stable electricity output for our Taiwan's northern region, which we also have one very big science park located in Hsinchu. Okay, and that also goes true for our AI data centers. Right now, AI data centers only consume less than 1% of the electricity consumption, total electricity consumption in Taiwan. This is because we only have one hyperscale data centers now situated in Zhanghua. But of course, in the future, there will be more. But as I said, recently, you can see the transmission bottleneck. So Taiwanese government actually right now, they has a regulation saying every data center over 5 megawatts, you are not allowed to set your data center in Taipei or in the northern region. And this is exactly why. This is because of the transmission bottleneck I mentioned. So, I mean, for data centers and for semiconductor industry, to secure Taiwan's economic strategic value, it is key to also to enhance your power grid and to overcome the transmission bottleneck in the future. So grid enhancement is very important for Taiwan to enhance its energy resilience in peaceful day. So now I will quickly turn to contingency. So how do we measure or to understand the Taiwan risk, Taiwan Strait crisis, and how that might pose some security concerns in terms of Taiwan's power system. So as you see from 2022, there's increasing numbers of all these drills that are done by PRC, right? And they are simulating the potential blockade that they wanted to do to Taiwan. And so this picture just showing the different years that they've done and these exercises. And there's starting being a discussion or in the media saying that, okay, so if PRC really did a quarantine or blockade that's stopping all these ships coming to Taiwan, how Taiwan can survive, how long can Taiwan survive? And they will say only 14 days, because they see Taiwan only has a very limited LNG stockpiles, which under the law, we actually ask our CPC to actually, you have a minimum stockpile of 11 days. And in general. So they will say if you only have 11 days of LNG stockpile, then maybe you can only survive for like 14 days or something. But this is a big misunderstanding, we will say, without any scientific database simulation. So what we did as a think tank, we're trying to use this public accessible data and to say what actually will be or could be in a real situation. So what we can do, I mean, the most challenging part for us to simulate any kind of crisis is that we don't know about the demand, right? Because during contingency or during emergency, you don't know how the power consumption will look like. Will everyone still goes like there every day and all factories still working on still functioning during that time? No, right? So how do we measure that kind of demand? One thing we did is that we're trying to use the second day of the Lunar New Year. Can people guess why? The second day of Lunar New Year? this is a big holiday in Taiwan. I mean, so everyone just go to their home. They will not stay in the cities, and the electricity consumption will just go low. And almost all our industrial sectors also shut down because they also need some family holidays off, right? So actually using this power demand, the curve will represent like 40% drop compared to the typical summer days. So this is, we said, will be the most likely scenario when emergency happen. If we cut down like 50% of the power supply, then this will be the demand curve elect. And if that's the demand, how Taiwan's energy system can supply them, we will say, because we do have a very limited amount of LNG stockpile, right? So we would like to best utilize them. So we will shift to coal instead of using LNG. So with coal and renewables, that actually can cover like 80% of the power demand in this scenario. And in total, actually, Taiwan can survive like 40 to 50 days. And this is not actually counting a further power rationing measures. For example, during the second day of Lunar New Year, there's still fabs going on because our TSMC people, they're hardworking people, so they still work even during holidays. So some of the fabs still going on, and this is the situation will look like. So this is very different from the 40 days simulation, right? And we do feel like this kind of information is very important to that the audience, international audience, to understand that Taiwan has its defense or its self-sufficiency capacity, and we still have, and how long would be that window to actually have our international allies to come in to help. I mean, this kind of data is what we did. So we do, based on that simulation, we have all other recommendation for our government to say, so in the short time, how can you enhance Taiwan's energy resilience, and what's in the long term you can do. So all in all, I will not go to the details. We can talk about that in the Q&A, but in general, continue your renewable transition because indigenous power options, it matters. And then also to diversify as much as we can in terms of energy supply. For example, the imported LNG countries, we're trying to have more from the US, right? In the future, we're going to diversify as much as we can. Yeah, so that's all from my team. And then I will just give the floor to our Deputy Director, Mingyan Zhang, and to share some of their recent reports and also some results from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tsai, and thank you, Professor Nathan, and all of you sitting here. My name is Mingyan Zhang, the Deputy Director for Economic Security. So my team, there's no screen here. My team primarily work on the kind of, people would say, the most important topic in the technology industry in Taiwan, which is semiconductor. But I think I can be more focused. I would say our focus is more on the OSINT, open source intelligent research into the supply chain, which means that we are working on the economic security issues. For example, like export control, outbound, inbound investment review, screening systems. But in order to advise the government or to provide insight to international partners, we would like to look deeper into the supply chain and to see how could we get insight from our supply chain partner, and then to see what kind of issue we should continue to put more attention on and to improve or to facilitate like a multilateral region of all the like technology democracy. So today I would primarily focus on three main reports we published recently on Chinese industries of semiconductor and AI chips. And I have to state first that I'm directing the whole team's research work, but these reports are not single author by me, so they are like a team effort of my whole team, right? And some of them still studying PhD here. They are all our non-resident fellows, and some of them working in Taipei in our headquarters. So this is the first report about the Chinese industry policy mechanisms. I will start from the story which called China's shock. So the first China shock came after China joined the WTO in 2001, when the country took over much of the low and middle end manufacturing. Then came the second China shock recently, as China began pursuing technological sufficiency and moved into industries with higher added values, especially advanced manufacturing after the launch of the Made in China 2025. You may know that. So this shift from first China shock to the second China shock allowed China to outperform global competitor in the area like EVs, shippings, green energies, and most notably semiconductors, and which have drawn worldwide attention. This figure on Chinese manufacturing capacity global share, the figure shows that the sharp rise in the 28 to 90 nanometer segment. I'm sorry about maybe it's not clear in terms of color, but as the gray line shows, it reflects the rapid growth of Chinese firms in the mature logic chip sector or legacy chip sector. And this figure shows Chinese investment in semiconductor increment, where its global share has been climbing year by year. And especially in the mature process segment, the share has reached nearly 40% and even exceeded 70% in some areas, which highlight that China's strong determination to achieve the technological self-sufficiency. So I would say the nature of the China semiconductor industrial policy is quite distinctive from the other countries. First, it is decentralized. So the local government decides and distributes most of the grants and equity funding. This has created fair competitions among localities to foster their own local champions. Local government-backed venture capital funds has been instrumental in supporting startup and shaping the regional innovation clusters. And the second feature, I would say China emphasized vertical integration. So the government supports span the entire supply chain from chip design to manufacturing to downstream products like EV or other consumer electronics. This means that both consumer demand and supplier costs are heavily influenced by policy incentives. And in contrast, the US, EU, and even Taiwan usually focus on their industrial policies on strengthening weaker segments like what we see in the Check and Sense Act of their supply chain, rather than attempting the full integration. And Shenzhen is a clear example of China's decentralized competition. The local government set its own production targets and invest across both design and manufacturing sector. It competes directly with other provinces and cities. It's trying to build its own semiconductor ecosystem and become a national, even international leader. By both Bloomberg or our own report in DSET, we have it has conducted research on Huawei shadow network, which also headquartered is in Shenzhen. The key takeaway is that regional industrial policy has led to the formation of a complete semiconductor ecosystem. Like Huawei, they would own the legacy chip manufacturer, memory chip manufacturer, even some emerging equipment provider. Before 2013, the Chinese industrial policy was centrally led. After 2014, it became more decentralized, with province gaining approval power for manufacturing projects. And in recent years, rising efficiency has prompted the shift back toward the decentralization, as we have seen in a lot of Xi Jinping's speech. China's policy package has two levels. At the national level, this includes corporate tax, corporate tax breaks, and the big fund, you may know. At the local level, the government provides subsidies for design cost grants tied to the sale target, which is very special, not seen in the other country, and run semiconductor or venture funds. These funds often invest in younger capital-light firms alongside infrastructure support like industrial park and share ID design platform. Actually, industrial park may copy the idea from Taiwan Hsinchu's industrial park. And one of the outcome of the China's local competition is the cheaper mature chips. Given that Chinese producer at a cost advantage over the US, and in comparison, you can see in the diagram, Taiwanese and Singaporean firms remain relatively competitive. And this chart also shows foreign facts like TSMC and UMC. Their investment in China stayed at 28 to 60 nanometer because the US export controls and Taiwan's investment screening system, and which limit how far they can go in China. Meanwhile, SMIC is where like Chinese government push for the advanced node. With the national and local government funding, SMIC now moved to 7 nanometer and even 5 nanometer. At the same time, other Chinese fabs like Hua Hong and Nextchip are expanding mature node chips to support the EVs markets and some other industrial chips. And in addition to data analysis, we also use the comparative case study to examine Chinese national strategies in the legacy chip, foundational chip sector, making the overall understanding more comprehensive for our partners. And there's some number here. One of the warning here is while Taiwan remains a key partner for the US and other immature chips, China is projected to surpass it by 2027, reaching 47% of global capacity, according to one of the prominent market intelligence companies in Taiwan. So looking back at the earlier point about the decentralizations and vertical integration I've mentioned, we call Chinese model as a pseudo-IDN strategy. This means that through the state support, local competition, and market protection, China connects different local champions across each segment of the whole supply chain without using direct ownership, and to function like one big IDN company, supporting various end product manufacturers. And these local champions then grow in technology and scale, eventually becoming national champion capable of outcompeting other international competitors. And for example, one of the case study here is like in Hefei, the local government built a necessary infrastructure to attract and cluster semiconductor firms. One standout case is Nextchip, which is a Chinese company that was once supported by Taiwan's chip manufacturer PSMC. And today, Nextchip, this company in China, its revenue performance has already surpassed that of its former mentor PSMC. And we also compare in the compare enterprise in the silicon wafer industry. National Silicon here, the company here, which is backed by the Chinese government, it would not be profitable without state subsidies. Like if you minus like the left current or right current. However, it still maintained a larger and longer term investment than both like MTCN, which is a private Chinese firm, and also like Wafer Works Shanghai, which is a Taiwanese investment company in China. So state subsidies allows National Silicon, with the company backed by Chinese government, to preserve the long-term competitive edge to sustain state support. And in the United States, Wolfspeed, which is a company once the global leader in the compound semiconductor subject, has fast-growing losses year by year as it struggles to compete with Chinese firm price advantages. So I'm running out of the time. So very quick, I will talk about our recent report on the AI memory chip in China. We took a deeper look at one of the cases of the Hefei model And in this case, we can see how local competition in China interact with the national chip strategies. And we also add a layer on how foreign technology flows in. This case, CSMT, which is a Chinese domestic competitor that now has strong potential in memory chip for AI applications. So CSMT 长兴储存 was founded in 2016 and released China's first domestically developed DDR4 DRAM chips in 2019. By the first quarter of 2025 this year, it's already captured 6% of the global DRAM market and is now expanding to HBM chip to serve the rapid growing AI market in the coming years. Hefei model has three main features, I will argue. First, local government like Hefei really understand the existing industry and build policy on top of those strengths. Second, they act as both investor and planner under national guidance. Third, they target sectors with strong market demand and clear application. So in terms of fundings, the Hefei government appear to take a lead. But when it comes to the company and technology development strategies, it's closely follow the market demand. And from this PPT, this page, we can see that CSMT case adds some insight into the key debate in U.S. current economic security policy, whether the debate is whether the export control works. In this case, U.S. sanction wipe off JHICC, Fujian Jinhua, one of the memory chip manufacturer in China, but unexpectedly helped CSMT rise as China's top DRAM producer because CSMT can get more resources and lessons from the JICC's failure. This suggests that export controls should be better account for overall industry dynamic to avoid creating new challenges in China. And another major factor is investment control and technology transfer. CSMT's technological foundation came from the German company Qimengda. Qimengda was founded from Infineon in 2006 to focus on DRAM, but it went bankrupt in 2009 during the global financial crisis. Between 2009 and 2019, Chinese government-backed companies aggressively acquired Qimengda's technologies and assets. CSMT later used these technologies to develop its DDR4 technology. So if you read the report, you can see the whole map layer. Finally, in terms of policy implementations, I will highlight three key points here, and maybe we can have more discussion later. First, we need a comprehensive understanding of China's semiconductor policy and develop dynamics in order to craft effective strategies. As local competition in China gradually shifts back toward decentralization, it is important to monitor what the new hybrid form of governance might emerge, and they could shape the future of tech competition. Second, with China's right in mature process foundational chip capacity, the US must consider how to best use its remaining choke points for export control and explore tools to block China from exporting its capacity to global markets, especially in the information and cybersecurity sensitive sectors. You may imagine that if maybe some days you have to buy the camera in your room to monitor your baby's activity if you work outside. You cannot imagine the chip there all made in China. And you cannot check the cybersecurity standard from those chips. Equally crucial is developing alternative outside China, such as sustaining Taiwan's production efficiency. And final point is that in emerging sectors like AI and automotive electronics, many still believe that it is safe to serve the Chinese market, which assume profit can be made without empowering China's technologically. But history has shown that China has repeatedly absorbed foreign technology to build its own capacity. So this assumption, I think, need to be critically re-examined. So I will stop here, and maybe next, Kaisen, our Deputy Director for Democratic Governance, can start the next section. Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much. My name is Kai-Sheng Huang, and I'm the Director of Democratic Governance at DSET. I just want to very briefly introduce our program. My program looks at two very specific areas. First of all, we're looking at information security, especially FIMI, which means foreign information manipulation and interference. And the second area we are looking at is AI, but we look at AI in a much broader geopolitical context, especially in the current US-China tech composition. So today I want to talk about why actually is our upcoming report, which is scheduled to be released in early 2026. I want to talk about why we think reviewing Chinese AI import has become rather essential, and why the process is legally contentious and technically complex. So let me just start with China's outward push. So I think over the past decades, wait a second, hold it. This is going to be easier for me. So China has made it very clear that AI is not really just limited to domestic modernization. It's something to sell to the world. So now, two major policy blueprints sort of define this vision. The first is the 2017 New Generation AI Development Plan. And the second is the 2024 AI Plus Initiative. And these two national plans sort of form what China is seen as a roadmap for AI supremacy. Basically, link data governance, model development, and the commercialization all together. So very briefly, I think at home, these AI systems are deployed first in smart cities, healthcare, and transport. And this sort of creates a massive data loops that keep improving performance over time. And once those systems are refined domestically, they are exported abroad, often as a full package of standards and the governance ideas about how data and institutions should be controlled. And just one of the very distinctive features about Chinese AI I want to highlight is I think China's approach to AI is largely application driven, not research first, which means it tend to focus on getting technologies into real world use rather than keeping them in the lab. So new AI tools are rolled out very quickly. They got tested, they got improved, they got scaled through everyday use. And these domestic deployments often create their own commercialization cycles. What works at home can be packed and sold abroad. So very briefly, I think China's approach is really turning to domestic implementation into a pipeline for exports, which means they tend to blend industrial strategy with global ambition. And I think this kind of policy has recently even had even stronger support from the Chinese central government. For example, in September 2025, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, along with 8 other central agencies, they issued a document called Several Policy Measures on Promoting Services Exports. That's a very long name, sorry. So now 3 things stand out there. The first of all, it sort of relaxed cross-border data transfer rules in free trade zones. Second, it built digital platforms for export rebates, including automated tax refund systems. And finally, it prioritized digital services like AI, R&D, intellectual property, and language technologies. So I think what is interesting is how China now treat data liberalization and the digital infrastructure as tools for export growth, which means China used them to accelerate the global reach of its AI-enabled services. And another distinctive feature about this expansion is the dual structure we want to emphasize. One focused on infrastructure, the other on governance. On the infrastructure side, China is building international data and cloud centers in free trade zones in Hainan province and elsewhere to sort of anchor its global services delivery. But at the same time, it keeps tight control at home, basically enforcing very strict compliance rules and maintaining rather broad state access to corporate data. So the distinct feature is the model is opened outward, but controlled inward. And that kind of mix makes Chinese AI very competitive abroad, but domestically inseparable from national security priorities. So now, the second part I want to look at, I want to very briefly share what happens when these Chinese systems enter democratic markets. And the key question we try to answer here is, how do democracies evaluate foreign AI technologies that might bring real economic benefits, but are also lack of transparency, politically sensitive, or even partially linked to the state? So that's where the idea of import review comes in. We try to treat it as a framework to sort of balance openness with security and accountability. But the next question is, how can we do it? So to give you by way of example, I think the TikTok case kind of captures this dilemma very perfectly. So the US response proposed 4 layers of control. First, a US-run operating entity. Second, local data hosting by Oracle. Third, a US-based consortium to handle daily operations. And finally, a technology licensing model where the core algorithm will stay under ByteDance's ownership. So I think the goal here is really to sort of strike a balance, which means to maintain national security while keeping platform running. Is that right? So, but in practice, I think the plan remains deeply contested for 2 reasons. The first challenge is data review. It has to do with China's data governance system, which rests on 3 interlocking laws: the data security law, the personal information protection law, and the cybersecurity law. For example, under the data security law, data in China is divided into important and core categories, and both of them are restricted by outbound transfer controls and China's national security review. Which, for example, under the personal information protection law, any attempt to export personal data would require one of the 3 paths here. First, a security assessment. Second, an official certification or a standard control clauses, and each of them has their own sharehold and sector limits. So I think because of this very complex, because of the complexity of these 3 sets of law, I think it's very difficult for foreigners to have any meaningful audit. Yeah. Another challenge is algorithm. So when it comes to algorithms, the constraints are even sharper. In 2020, China's Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Science and Technology updated the catalog of technologies subject to export control. And in this document, 2 new items were added. First, personalized information recommendation algorithm, and second, AI interactive interface technology. And this listings means that algorithms cannot be sold outright. They can only be licensed, and only with the government approval. And the same restriction were reaffirmed again in 2023. So I think even if a democracy wants to inspect the algorithm or the AI system, it can only assess it as a service, not a source code, or not as a part of algorithms. And that make algorithmic transparency strictly impossible and turn auditability itself into a geopolitical problem. So finally, I think because of the kind of regulatory challenges we identify, I think this brings us to 3 very open questions. First of all, I think should democracy strictly restrict Chinese AI imports? That might strengthen security, but it could also slow innovation. Or should I just allow selective engagement as we are trying to argue, which means accepting that some risk will remain? And second, can we actually build OD mechanism that work? Can they meaningfully access open source or licensed model when the underlying data flow are still opaque? And finally, how can democracies and their allies coordinate their safeguards and oversight systems so we don't end up with fragmented, inconsistent regulatory regimes? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I hope everyone's still awake after 3 of the information intensive presentation. And my name is Honglen Tiu, and I am the Deputy Director and non-resident fellow of our National Security Research Program in DSET. And I want to extend my gratefulness to Professor Nansen and the Weatherhead Institute for bringing us together here to discuss this very important issue about Taiwan resilience. And as my colleagues have outlined, that Taiwan's approach resilience in every aspect. So Tsai described the energy and infrastructure resilience, sustain daily life under any potential pressure contingency, and Mingyan explained how the semiconductor and the economic security anchor autonomy in global supply chain. And just recent, and Kaisen shows how AI governance and digital sovereignties protect the information domain. And my text today is to complete that picture with the national security pillars. So how Taiwan defends industrial bases and especially its drone ecosystems, put those principles into practice on the grounds. So imagine this, if energy keep Taiwan running, semiconductor keep Taiwan connect to the world and provide semiconductor chips that world needed, and AI secure its information spaces, then defense industrial bases ensure that Taiwan can stand and fight when all other systems are tested. So only few years ago, just few years ago before pandemic, although I know that for many of us it's like last century, but just before pandemics, AI Taiwan's drone effort were started. So our small business, university labs, and state industry each pursue their own design and often rely on imports, sometimes Chinese components on those designs. And there's some creativity in those activities, but it's not enough. And in 2023, a new policy changed this situation. So our executive yuan introduced a policy called 3 Objectives and 5 Strategies, underlying a linked it between defense, industry, and export. So at the heart of this reform is organizations called TEDIBOA, which is a private public partnership organizations, the Taiwan Excellence Drone Industry and Business Alliance. So TEDIBOA functions as a connective tissue between defense planner and civilian industry. So its mission is build a non-red defense industrial basis. Once that one can design, test, and produce even if external supply line is been cut off. So this should mirror what you just hear from my colleagues, just a move from procurement modulations toward resilience mobilizations. So like our energy grid or semiconductor fabs, the defense sector is being redesigned to survive disruptions rather than try to avoid any disruptions. So today, more than 300 domestic companies contribute to the UAS system, UAS productions, including airframes, flight control modules, AI payload, and logistic support. So at the center stand one of the industrial park in Jiayi. It coordinates the research and design under the category of 3 chips and 2 software, which means secure control, flight control chips, AI vision processor, encrypted communication module, and the integration software that bind them all together. So our Ministry of National Defense, which is the lead defense planner of Taiwanese governments, they plan to procure more than 50,000 of the drones by 2027. And this delivery will start in 2026 and finish in 2028. So the number itself is less important than what they represent, because 50,000 is not a very big numbers. The meanings this procurement represent is an entire distributed production network capable to scaling quickly and absorbing losses. So factories in peacetime become a repair and and repairment hub in the crisis, and that's industrial resilience translate into defense readiness. So this approach draws on the lesson of Ukraine, which is very unfortunate. We all know that deterrence today rests not only on what can strike first, but what can recover fastest. So when production is cut off or disrupted and the designs are marginalized, a nation's need to think that how can it replace losses in days, if not in months, right? So so that protect of an opponents, they can rebuild faster that it can be destroyed. So raise that cost of coherence for our biggest potential enemy, POA. And because those capacities are built through civilian industry, deterrence is not longer confined to the military. It becomes social embedded. Engineers, small business, and universities are all contribute to sustaining the combat power during the contingency. So that is, from my side, that is what the whole society defense look like when you live as a slogan and enter the workshop floor. Okay, so let me turn a little bit from the domestic side of view to international side of view. So we are very understand that if Taiwan want to reach this kind of industrial resilience, we cannot do it alone. So in our research, we lay out like 4 layer models to try to advise our government how to guide our private sector to build up this capacity from 0 to 1. So this models from the very bottom of it is try to maintain and repair those drones by bought from overseas, from other countries. And then you start to thinking about technology transfer, IP transfer for you to learn how to manufacturing subsystems. And then after that, you learn how to integrate those subsystems together and try to assemble how to assemble the drones that we need to use. And the final step, we need to try to learn how to design with the advanced technology companies, no matter it's in European country or in United States, to create a variant of their platform that is really suited for Taiwan's contingency situations. So each layer of this, step by step, move Taiwan from a buyer, simply buyer, to a licensed producer, and then we can be the inventor or co-designer of those platforms. So those partnership, especially the partnership with United States, is only endure when it backed up by a consistent policy and institutionalized mechanisms. So that is what we mean by industrial deterrence infrastructures, and the connective writing that link policy to programs and to the institutions that keep cooperation moving forward. So on the U.S. side, we observe that the executive order and the Blue U.S. framework define what is a trusted supplier. the standard of that. And recent Senate passed NDAA 2026 also include a lot of standards for joint project, especially for Taiwan and United States joint project. And back in the February of this year, the Partnership of Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience, initiated by United States Department of Defense, now include Taiwan. So that linking us with 14 partners in Indo-Pacific region, coordinating together for secure supply chains on emerging technology and dual-use technology they can use in military operations. But with all of those critical measurements and policy in place, there is still a critical gap. Taiwan now still lack of formal coordination mechanisms with airlines certification, testings, and export procedure with the United States. So most of our drone companies and drone makers, they are small companies, small firm. So they facing the uncertainty on how to compliance with those standards. And especially when they are trying to making the larger drones with more capability to carry more payload when takeoff, they facing the regulation under ITAR and TAA. And there is still no joint testing center in Taiwan, and no one can guide those small firms through those regulation compliance loophole. So at DSET, we recommend 3 different steps. The first one is for our advise our government to establish a joint testings and certification center with our ally partners, not only with United States, but also with our NATO partners in Europe. And the second is that we advise our governments and also advise other partners, governments, to formally treat Teddy Boa, although that is not a government's institutions, but official treat Teddy Boa as an official liaison for the cooperation between foreign country and Taiwan. And so I think that maybe there's a little bit boring for you because there is a lot of bureaucratic details, but they do matters. Those policy convert project by project cooperation into codified industrial deterrence infrastructures, and the wiring that ensures continuity when politics or crisis create fractions. We all know that we are all democratic countries. Our government will shift a lot if another party take the lead. But that is exactly why we need to codify and try to institutionalize those things. And so finally, scaling remains a shared challenge, right? So as my colleague just mentions I think we have a shortcoming here. But anyway, so just like my colleague mentioned in their presentation, that this kind of challenge is noted for energy, for semiconductors, and the limiting factors is not ideas. We have a lot of amazing ideas. We have a lot of amazing policies. And the true limiting factor is the production speed and capacities. If we only have idea, we do not have a capacity to make it come true, that is just only an idea. So the same limiting factor applies to drones. Resilience means building faster and safer than our enemies can disrupt. So this scaling issue is shared across sectors: energy, semiconductors, AI systems, and defense. So resilience in the end is about how can we work together to scaling trusted systems faster than our enemy can, and faster than our enemy can disrupt. So to looking across today's presentation, the pattern I think is very clear. So no matter it's energy, it's semiconductor, it's AI, it's defense resilience, they are not separate fields. They are interlocking layers of one systems. It's a system for Taiwan to stand up to fight our own fight. And Taiwan's strong ecosystem shows how that system operates in reality as a case study. So Taiwan's drone ecosystem, it relies on civilian innovations integrated with defense planning, which is from our national Ministry of National Defense, and our industrial capacity converted into strategic endurance. So for Taiwan, embedding its defense industry within allied supply chain ensures staying power. So for our partners, especially United States, recognizing Taiwan as a co-producer, not a client, not a simple buyer, and eventually transform the deterrence into shared resilience, because that when Taiwan is under attack, global supply chain will be disrupted, and that is not only about Taiwan. So let me end with the one line on the screen. So the resilience is the capacity to keep building when everything else is under attack. Taiwan's factories, engineers, and drones embody that capacity. And that is what deterrence means. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is the website.
Yeah.
By the way,
Thank you all so much. I think that was very rich. It was not boring, in fact. Is all of this material online on your website for us to study? Yes. And some reports are in English and some are in Chinese, or is everything in English?
Most of them are English.
Uh-huh.
Yes.